I believe, like, for example, I had to do some generational healing from my mother's side of the women on her side of the family, and had to go back and had to go back and had to go back. And so I knew that in present time that the healing that I was going through, I knew that it was also going to be transferred in for my sisters. I have two sisters, had two sisters. And I knew that the healing was then going to transfer into my nieces and moving forward for the children that my nieces have, because I don't have children. So I just know, sense, and feel that the healing, again, from a generational, multi-generational perspective down to the DNA, that, you can heal previous generation, current, present time, and future generations simultaneously.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Ask Julie Ryan Show. It's where we blend spirituality and practicality to help you live a life of purpose and joy. We have Dr. Mary Sanders on the show with us today. Dr. Mary is a practicing chiropractor and energy healer who's focused on helping women over 40 enhance their lives physically, emotionally, and energetically. I'm interested to hear about Dr. Mary's journey in combining scientific-based and energy medicine to help her patients heal. Please remember to subscribe, leave a comment, and share this episode with your family and friends. Now let's go talk with Dr. Mary. Dr. Mary, my girl, I'm so thrilled to have you on this show. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, Julie, the honor is all mine. Thank you for hosting me. You're so gracious and so considerate. Thank you.
Oh, my delight. You say you're on a mission to empower successful women over 40 to bounce back physically, emotionally, and energetically. Why do you focus on that niche of people?
I think that's a very legitimate question, Julie. It all started when I went through my own personal burnout. And at the time, quite honestly, and I'll share with you, I was about 45 or so. And at that time, I did not have the necessary tools nor resources in order to be able to navigate that transitional period of my life. And so if I can share the School of Hard Knocks with other people and save them from going through what I went through, then all the more power to the other people listening.
Are you willing to share a little bit about what you went through? What was the gist of your School of Hard Knocks, as you call it?
Yeah, I am. And again, I do believe in the power of words and the words that we speak and what we choose to think. And so I have restored my burnout and my adrenal exhaustion to one that has a silver lining and an optimistic ending. So when I was fresh out of chiropractic school, you know how it is. You go and you get your professional training, but very few of us have any business training. And so you go about the world trying to figure out what works, what doesn't work. And then you get obsessed with the idea of growing a business. And that's exactly what happened for me. I was motivated for all the right reasons as I became a chiropractor and wanted to have my hands on patients. And then after 20 some odd years, I can honestly say my shift, I will honestly say, I shifted away from my pure intention of assisting and serving others and then into the quest of becoming a successful business person. And so what ended up happening is that I created something that was beautiful from the outside. From the outsider, it looked like I had achieved the quote-unquote American success. I had multiple practices. I had a high-volume clinic. I was overseeing many doctors and a big staff. And Julie, I was miserable. I really was unhappy. I found that I no longer really had a true compass, what my true north was for how I really intended and what my purpose, what my alignment was, what my blueprint stated that I needed to be doing. And so consequently, I made myself ill. I made myself with, just the stress, the response from stress caused the adrenal fatigue, immunosuppression, and also metabolic disorders as well. All three of those cascading into a perfect storm. So I was experiencing hormones way out of whack. I was depleting my life force energy. I really had no boundaries when it came to my energetic field, and I crashed. And I crashed really hard, and to make up a long story, I woke up and my husband escorted me to the other side of the world, and I woke up in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam.
What?
Yes. Yes, I knew I took a big step there. So my husband was interviewing to be a international headmaster of the Ho Chi Minh City School for American students. And so to make a long story short, he convinced me to sell my practice, sell our homes, leave our materialistic possessions behind, and go live in the expat lifestyle for a little over a decade.
Wow. I've never heard anybody say, I crashed and I woke up on the other side of the world, and there weren't any drugs involved, right?
No, no. But let's just say it happened just that fast.
So you knew you were being led, that you really needed a big change.
Yeah, Julie, I had no choice but to surrender. I knew that if my will centers became overactive and I continued to push my way into what I thought was an existence, there wouldn't be anything left. I would be completely depleted. And so the universe opened up an avenue for me to pivot, and I took that opportunity to pivot.
Wow. How was it in Vietnam?
Oh my God. Let's just say I went through a huge crisis. I had no idea who I was, what I stood for, who I was outside of a brick and mortar place of Dr. Mary. Again, I was just like, who am I? What am I doing here? What's my next step? Somebody lead me down this path because I have no idea what I'm doing. So I did what any logical person would do, Julie. I left Ho Chi Minh City. I ran away from Ho Chi Minh City and found myself in Bali, Indonesia. I traveled down there to complete my YTT. I was practicing yogi for over 30 years, and I thought, why not? I now have time, so go down to Bali, finish it up, learn more about yoga, take some time for yourself, saturate yourself in the community of the Balinese people, and just a sweet, sweet, sweet place. And then, yeah, I did that for 30 days.
Well, wow. You, when you want to get away from it all, you're serious about that. My goodness.
I'm very serious. Yeah. No, that's a pattern of mine.
Yeah. But obviously it served you well. So what did you do to restore your psyche and your body and your, sense of self and to recover from all of that stress?
Well, it was a slow journey. But something really beautiful happened when I was down in Bali doing my YTT. I slowed down. Like, my central nervous system had been so dysregulated for so long that I finally was tapping into what it felt like to witness the breath and to create spaciousness within my energetic body. And so it allowed me the space to settle down and to meditate. And so I got heavy into meditation when I returned back to Ho Chi Minh City, and just some really wonderful, magical things started to happen into my world. And so for the first time, I had, the opportunity to listen. So meditation was a big part of that.
And that's such a spiritual part of the world, too. My gosh, the culture is so ancient. Did you find that was the case when you were there? Could you feel a difference were you in Colorado when you left?
We were in Colorado Springs, which is heavily saturated Christian community. I think within the town at that time would have been over 400,000. There would have been, I'm not exaggerating, let's say the presence of 200 different congregations that are within that community. So there's a heavy influence of Christianity within that community. And then to be in Southeast Asia, in the land of Buddhism, and then to experience the Hinduism in Bali, the veil, Julie, living in Ubud, the veil between the physical and the spiritual is so thin. So thin. When you think of Indonesia being so primarily Muslim, and then you have this beautiful island, a single island in a mass of Muslim community, and then you have the tradition deeply rooted, within the soil. You can feel the history. You can feel the rituals. It was such a priceless experience to be able to feel the mindfulness, the daily practices of the Hindu people on the island. They're simply beautiful. There are various different tribes, if you will, neighborhoods that still make up Ubud. And consequently, that you've got the kings of these various different tribes, and the women have a huge matriarchal influences to the daily activities. And the women who tend to the spirit houses and to, invite and evoke and release the spirits out of the spirit houses from the ancestors, just to witness that. Oh, wow. I'm almost speechless when I think about being able to witness and to observe the movement of energy as it just transfers. And again, I say that the plane was so thin. The physical into the spiritual is so thin there. And then just the interesting opposition with Ho Chi Minh City, that's bustling with a lot of energy. And quite honestly, the energy is not as pure. And so when I experience the congestion, I can feel the hardships that that country and the people have experienced. And that's hard to witness. And you can feel the stagnant energy. There's not that free flow from the physical into the spiritual. It feels really stuck in a dense way on that plane, especially in Ho Chi Minh.
I bet. And is it because Bali's less developed too? Not to mention, obviously, all the tragedies that have happened in Vietnam over the many decades. But do you think that has something to do with it as well? Or is it just the ancestral stuff?
It's the ancestral stuff that becomes really prevalent. And the rituals, I can't emphasize how deeply seated they are within the community. It's just the offerings, the daily offerings, and just how mindful the Balinese are in their day in and day out activities. It's just priceless to witness.
What's a spirit house?
Little spirit house, resides within the corner of the property. And it looks like a tiny little home up on a platform.
Like a birdhouse?
Yeah, well, a little bit bigger than a birdhouse, but kind of. And then what they do is they take the beautiful silk and the decorative and they dress it from the base on down. And there are specific times of the year that they release those skirts on the bottom. And again, I was not privy to participate in the daily offerings because that's not my tradition. But they would take the necessary flowers and fruits and rice and incense sticks, and they would do the offerings, and they would have their rituals and their prayers that they would say in their offerings to the ancestors that came before them.
Interesting. So are the spirits that live in the spirit house on somebody's property, are they primarily spirits of deceased loved ones, do you think? Or are they just be any spirit that's passing by?
Yeah, I believe so. I think that they are friendly spirits that are helped to bless the land and the crops and the homes and everything that happens on that physical property. Again, this is not my area of expertise, but it really did feel like an honoring, a reverence, if you will.
Well, that's the first I've ever heard of a spirit house. I've never heard that reference before, but it's lovely, certainly. And I think in the Asian cultures, especially, and perhaps around the world, and maybe we've just gotten away from it in our last 150 years or something of being developed here in America, but I believe that the ancestors in especially the Asian cultures have been so revered, whereas here in America, sometimes elderly people are seen as, oh, they're old, they don't know what they're talking about. And in other cultures, that the more ancient cultures, been my experience, those people are really treated with the utmost respect, as they should be, because they've lived, so much of life. Certainly, I feel like I am way more knowledgeable now than I was when I was in my 20s, and worthy of respect. Thank you very much. Like anybody else. But I do find that there's a difference in the cultures. We even see that with immigrants in America, where the elderly people stay in the home and the family cares for them way more than sending them to a nursing home or a care facility. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but seems to be a difference in the culture. Would you agree with that?
I totally agree. And it's a beautiful concept when you do have an elderly person who is living in the same home with cross generation. There is a shared wisdom that happens. And you and I, both being seasoned women of our age, we've earned the right to share our wisdom, and so have the elderlies in Southeast Asia, so have the elderlies here in the United States. I think that there is a lot of wisdom that could be shared, and it just happens more predominantly when you're all living in the same household.
My family, after Christmas, this was a long time ago because my sister was still alive, and she did a kind of a board game kind of a thing that she wrote up questions, not only about the family, but historical things. I'm trying to think of the name. What's the name of the game where it's just all facts and people can know it? Well, those of us that were my age, my siblings and my sisters-in-law and my brother-in-law, but we were smoking the young guys, even though they were just so pumped up because, they had all this trivia in their heads. Well, and afterwards, my son Jonathan said, "Mom, how did you know all this stuff?" I said, "Because I lived through it." So that's how I knew, what President Johnson did or what some other government official had done, or the first landing on the moon. I knew Neil Armstrong. I watched it as a 10-year-old and that kind of thing. So I think some of that gets lost, but we're hopefully getting back to that. Let's circle back around to women being overwhelmed. Why do you think so many of us are overwhelmed? Did it change with the women's lib movement where women said, okay, I can work, I can take care of the family, I can take care of elderly parents, I can do it all. And they just took on 2 or 3 times the amount of responsibility. What do you think? Was there a change, or has it been like this for forever?
I don't know that my grandmother necessarily, she didn't work outside of the home. So I don't think that she had the additional responsibilities of the professional work on top of home life. My mother, she did fight to go to college, and she'd always been working outside of the home, and she was driven to achieve success, professional success. And I think that generationally speaking, I think that the women's liberation did have an influence on it. And then there is the added responsibility that even though we are out there in the work environment, there's still the responsibility of caring for the home, not only the home of the children, and just when the children seem to be leaving the nest, then the increased responsibilities of the family members of the parents, then that becomes their primary focus, and they're not living in the same household. So, you've got the responsibility of parents being in assisted living, the professional responsibilities, and just the personal and lifestyle responsibilities all coupled in there. And I think that, there are a lot of the shifting for equality that the women can do just as much, if not more, than the men. I think that underlining tone also motivated women to step up the game. And so consequently, I think that, in today's day and age, at least after COVID, with the great resignation, people are now saying, time out. What is all of this nonsense? What are we striving for? And they're second guessing what it is that they're working towards. Are they working for an organization? Are they working towards something that aligns with their purpose? And so those are possibly two separate avenues people are negotiating. And they're realizing that after COVID, that perhaps they really want to be in alignment with their blueprint, with their soul's desire, with their life's intention. And so I think that people are pivoting. They're shifting how they align with their efforts. And it's not necessarily work in production of a pay stub or an income or a salary. It's the efforts of what they want to exude towards something that's much greater and outside of themselves. So I see a shift happening globally, and that's part of why I see an increase of women who are saying, wow, I don't know how to navigate this. This is something new. How do I gracefully make this transition? So that's what my intention has been, to try to help ease the transition for people who are shifting and pivoting.
Yeah. And I am eternally grateful to the Gloria Steinems and the Bella Abzugs, and Jane Fonda was part of that group, and a lot of them who really paved the way for my generation. I'm 65. And I, coming out of college, was a quota to be hired by a huge multi-billion-dollar company. They had a quota to hire a certain amount of women. And so I got hired as part of the quota. Now, would I have still gone to work for them? Yeah, I think I would have, but certainly it helped when that happened. And now here, all these generations later, the girls, I was a sorority advisor for a long time at the University of Alabama, a volunteer sorority advisor. And these girls are clueless about, women in the workplace and the whole glass ceiling and all of that kind of thing. And furthermore, I think companies have changed a lot. It used to be that people would spend their whole careers with a certain employer. And now I forget what the average is, but it's like 8 or 10 different employers in somebody's lifetime. I know my father spent his whole career, almost 40 years, with the same company. And that's changed too. It used to be all about the loyalty to the company. And in my dad's case, when they said you're being transferred, well, they would uproot the whole family and move for a job. That doesn't happen as much anymore as it did when I was growing up. So I think that the whole zeitgeist has shifted, not just for women, but for men as well. And kids are saying, I want my quality of life to come first, and then I want the job and the career to come second. Are you seeing that, or just not in your population? Are you starting to see that creep in some?
A little. I just want to go back to and second what you were saying about, the loyalty. Again, you're just like your parents demonstrated 40 years to an organization. I witnessed my parents doing the same thing. And they stayed within the same university for 40 years and taught as professors, or they were in the administrative level in education as well. So I was taught that you go to school, you focus on one topic, you come out, you graduate with a degree, and then you stay in that line of industry until you retire. And so it helps if, they have a matching pension or, something that contributes into your retirement. That's what the focus was when I graduated from college. And you're right. The same is true in younger kids in the younger generation. There is more room for exploration when they're studying, meaning that they can change their major umpteen numbers of times and not have to declare a single topic for studies. And so the same is true, that they can still get that one degree, come out into the world, and they have the curiosity to embark on various different jobs and kind of bounce around to find out what finally sticks for them. And then, they stay there for 3 or 4 years, and then they find something new that they want to lean into. And there's in many respects, Julie, I'm kind of envious of that mindset, of that upbringing, because it takes the weight off the responsibility of being so focused on a single track.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, by the age of 25, when I started my first company, the first of 9 that I've founded in 5 different industries, it really stemmed from me looking at this corporate thing and going, this is a bunch of nonsense. These guys, my male 50-something manager, really the straw that broke the camel's back for me was he was giving me a hard time about how my samples in my trunk of my car were arranged. And I thought, who cares? It works for me. And I said to him, have you seen my sales numbers? I was a sales rep. I mean, I was blowing it out of the park as far as the quotas, overachieving the quotas and stuff. And I thought, this is such nonsense that I have to deal with, not just me, but the other, I was the only woman in my whole region, it was all guys. But I just thought, I don't want to spend my life doing this. So I went out on my own, and the rest is history. Thank God that I had the courage to go out on my own like you, to start your own practice. Along those lines, you were born with a hearing loss situation, and you were diagnosed around the age of 3, right?
That's correct. Yes.
But all of your education has been mainstream, meaning you didn't have any special needs kind of, exceptions to the rule for you because you were hearing impaired.
That is correct. Both of my parents, as I mentioned, were educators. And so they made decisions based upon the tools and resources that they had available to them at that time. And even though I was born and raised, well, I wasn't born, I was raised in central Illinois, a very small community, Charleston, Illinois, which has a population of 20,000, but 10 of which come from the state university. So it's a small rural community in the midst of corn and bean fields, and it happens to be the county seat. And so of all the other counties, they pool together in Charleston, and all the hearing impaired children go to the same school. And so to make a long story short, I was mainstreamed, and I happened to have in the same age group a group of hearing impaired kids that traveled along with me in my academic career. So I would be, the seating arrangements as it was back then, it would be alphabetized, and Sanders was always in the back. So I would get moved closer to the front of the room. And then consequently, I would be kind of shifted to the side of the room where all of the hearing impaired kids would be in a single row, and there would be an interpreter in the front side of the room. So, the silver lining is that I literally had this internal desire to achieve academically because it was, internally, it's like I was trying to prove something for myself and also prove something to my parents that they made the right choice in mainstreaming. So again, I believe that created a sense of rigidity, a sense of perfectionism, a sense of overdrive, overachieving, sympathetic dominance, if you will, that internal go, go, go. But yes, I believe that my hearing impairment was a blessing because it allowed me to receive information above and beyond the traditional five senses. And that being, I developed my clairsentience and my ability to sense and feel other people's emotions and also feel environments. When I walked into a classroom or into a party, I could read and understand what was happening clairsentiently before I could really hear or digest the information. So that allowed me to develop my extrasensory perception. And I've worked hard my entire life to continue that development. I guess I should say not my entire life. I desensitized during my young adult. And then when I finally went to chiropractic school is when I allowed that information to flow freely.
And how do you use it in your practice now?
I use it every day. As a medical intuitive, it's my special gift. It's how I tap into a zone of expansion when I'm holding sacred space for another person. And then my psychometry goes spot on. I'm able to feel discordant energies, the energies that don't belong to the other person. And then I'm able to clairsentiently work or feel through the other person's body. So that allows me to better understand the energetic system that might be compromised in the person that's receiving the reading and the healing, and allows me to support them in a way that I think is unique. And with my medical background, it allows me to be able to kind of dissect, if you will, to get to the origin of the problem, whether it be a physical problem, an emotional problem, or an energetic issue.
So, and you know what a patella looks like?
I do.
So let's say I was a new patient and I was coming in to see you off the street. First of all, do you work with people remotely too, or just in person?
I do. Yeah, I have a small boutique office. I kind of chuckle because you know how life works. You have large 5,000 square foot facilities and multiple offices. And now I think my office might be 300, 200 square feet. It's just me. So I do some hands-on in personal, and I also do energetic healing in person. And then my strength, the bulk of my practice is to support people remotely. So that's when I get to really expand my field, create an entrainment, and hold space for another person.
Are you doing chiropractic adjustments on them sometimes too?
Well, not remotely, clearly.
No, obviously. Although I do chiropractic adjustments energetically every day that I work with clients. Every day I see them in my mind's eye.
That is true. And I have worked with degenerative spinal issues that way as well. But the bulk of my chiropractic sessions are in person here in Boulder, Colorado. So, but like I said, my strength, my forte is to work remotely because that allows me to truly expand and to train. And it really gives me, I have to be honest, when I am in session doing energy work with somebody in person, I find myself withholding my expansion because I don't want to. I never ever want to merge with another person with their energetic system, and I don't want them to be overwhelmed energetically. So I find that I sometimes make myself a little bit smaller, energetically speaking, in person versus when I do remote sessions.
Interesting. Say more about that. So you're just feeling like it may be too much voltage with somebody in person, for lack of a better description.
Yeah. And I am mindful of that. I have had, situations working with people in person. They just have so bluntly said, can you tone it down a little bit? So I can modulate my energetic systems, but where I receive most of the information is when I'm more in an expanded state. So, and that comes from the awareness and the experience of having over 15 years of meditation, a strong meditation practice. And somatically, like I said, with my strength being in clairsentience, that my 30 plus years of being a yoga practitioner, it allows me to know my own physical body and my own sensations. So I know what's mine and what's somebody else's.
Mm-hmm. So when what do you call them, a client or a patient? How do you refer to him? Both. Okay. So when a client/patient comes to work with you, whether it be remote or in person, what's your technique? Do you turn on your energy before they come in? Have you meditated for an hour ahead of time? Can you walk us through something and give us a couple of examples of things that you would pick up or see or feel, and then what happens during the healing? So sounds to me like you diagnose first and then you go in and do the healing.
So as a medical practitioner, when somebody decides, I want to work with this lady, I have them fill out a comprehensive intake evaluation. And this is it's more integrative information, more than what you would typically fill out walking into an MD's office. So I want to know, how many people you live with. I want to know if you feel safe in your home. I want to know if you have pets. These are the things that I want to know prior to coming in. And I also definitely want to hear from the patient and find out what avenues, what modalities have they tried, what has been successful in the past and what has not been successful. And so by the time I get to reach a patient, yes, I do meditate prior to connecting with a person, whether it be in person or remotely, so that I have already scanned their field respectfully, so that I can have a bird's eye view heading into the session. And then what ends up happening is that I'm always asking them, what do you intuitively feel? If you did have the answers to your illness, what would be the cause or the root of these illnesses? Because I want to empower the patient to be able to share what I believe, that everybody has the somatic intelligence that resides within each and all of us, so that we have, if we just take a moment in an expanded state, we have access to a lot of information. So I always ask. And so then after we're done connecting, the first thing that I do is set an entrainment frequency. And I do that by bringing a person wherever they are within their autonomic nervous system. The regulation is considered to be a downward regulation, so that they're more in a parasympathetic dominance, so that they're more in a state of rest and digest and heal. Because I know science has proven that if we are in more of a parasympathetic, the healing, the transmission that we receive is more sustainable, it's more transformative. So again, I want people to be in a grounded state so that the transformation does occur. If I find somebody is not grounded and they're up and out and disassociated energetically from their physical body, then that's the first step. Bring them back home. Really try to promote the embodiment. So, for example, I'll just take an example of a woman that I have been seeing. And to make a long story short, she was coming in with a rare blood cancer disorder that's found within the bone marrow. And so what I started sensing and feeling was a deficiency located within the pelvic bowl, specifically within the first chakra. And the themes around the first chakra are all about safety, security, being able to really trust, like capital T, trust. The universe is going to provide you with all of your needs. And so what I was sensing was perhaps a history of abandonment. And then found out later that there was a couple of divorce issues and some financial disruptions as a result of the change of marital status. And so that was deeply rooted. That was the present time awareness that was deeply rooted within this space of the first chakra. And so what I was finding is that the bones and the mineralization of the bones was intimately connected into the turnover of the red blood cells within the marrow. So that was first chakra. But what kept coming up was the sense of there was two big issues revolving around the space of the third chakra. And that shows up for me as pancreas primarily, but also some liver, gallbladder, spleen issues. So I started to tap into the control issue. The control of autonomy was a big one because some of the relationships were compromising to her individuality. And so between the understanding and the pairing of the first and the third chakra, better assisted it'd be by viewing this, I was able to better support, hold space for the turnover of fresh blood flow, healthy red blood cells, kind of that, same thing that happens with the bone, the osteoblastic and clastic activity of bone being laid down and bone being, sloughed off. That whole activity was happening within the long bones of her structure. So I could see the fresh blood flow that was happening. And so that was really, really quite beautiful. And we worked together for quite a while. And she called me one day and she's like, Mary, you have to be the first person to hear this. And I went and got my cancer markers. And my cancer markers are way down, they were up 30 plus. Now they're down to hovering around 6. And she was just elated. And I just really had to remind her that she and her spirit were the one that were doing the healing. We just created the space.
Right. I say the same thing. Nobody heals anybody else. As a doctor, you don't heal anybody else. You're helping the person heal themselves.
We're just a facilitator. At least that's my role that I take, Julie. And I think I hear that from you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd love to use the example of you go to the emergency room because you got a big old cut in your leg and you're bleeding like crazy. Well, what are they going to do? They're going to stitch up the wound. But the ER doctor doesn't make your skin grow back. You make your own skin grow back. And that's how all of this works as well. I think it's interesting, too, that you mentioned that there was an emotional component. I find that there's always an emotional component that's connected to any kind of disease or illness. Have you found the same thing?
Yes, and I'll go one step further and say there's a neurological component to it as well. And stemming from when we talk about the emotional body and we think about, the second layer of the energetic aura or the biofield, and then we think about the chemical response that gets solicited from the hormonal regulation into the bloodstream. I think that that's what triggers the brain and the neuropeptides to change, creating neural patterns within the brain. So I find that the emotional component, due to the plasticity of the brain, we can change we rewire some of those conditioned responses or belief patterns or those emotional responses that we have. So yes, I believe that if there's a physical, there's an emotional, there's a neurological and
I see
energetic
that
as
too.
well.
And I think healing the emotional part of the equation is the most important part, really, of a healing, because we can fix body parts all day long, but if you're still got an emotional thing going on in how I perceive it, Dr. Mary, is that there's a breach in the energy field membrane. That's the container that holds the energy that makes up our body and our spirit. And if we're leaking power, we can fix body parts all day long. But if you're leaking power, what's the point? It's like, you get a new radiator in your car and you pay a lot of money for it, but then you go to start the car and you got a dead battery. Well, it doesn't help you much with that new radiator in the car. Same kind of a thing. And so I always tell my clients, look, there's always an emotional component there. We're going to get to the bottom of it. It may be something dramatic. It may be something simple. Maybe maybe a situation where somebody called you a bad name when you were little and it hurt your feelings. And we think as an adult, well, that was no big deal. And yet it was a big deal to your 3-year-old little self when that happened. So it's always fascinating to me. I also find that sometimes that energy block is caused by a past life event that has been brought forward in this life to explore it some more. Have you done any work with that?
I have. And I loved your description of talking about how there's been some kind of, I'm going to use the words, I believe that our auric field or our biofield is multi-layered. And when the environment, whether it be the harsh words that were said, on the playground when you were 3, the environment, the words, the situation, the energy from the environment has to come through the various different layers of the biofield. And then once it gets into the physical body, that's when it becomes stored. So if you think about the various layers, like layers of the onions, you can cut through an onion, you can peel the layers off, you can poke it, you can tear it, you can do many different things. And the same thing is true for our biofield as well. And so repetitively or, micro traumas or big T traumas can perforate through those layers and it gets stored. The issues are within the tissues. So the emotions get stored within the tissues. And what ends up happening, you're right, Julie, you don't have to relive the trauma. And sometimes it's bigger in our mind than it is within our tissue. We just have to get to that layer.
Right.
And so because of fear and because of apprehension, people are hesitant or fearful of leaning into that somatic awareness that says, I have tightness or I have blocked energy or I have pain. The somatic awareness is counterintuitive for us to want to lean into that pain for fear of feeling the emotion. So if we can go kind of a pendular activity of the sense and the felt awareness of where that is within the physical body, acknowledge it, sense it, see it, feel it, back away, back into another area that has more spaciousness within the body, and then shift your awareness back into the area of contraction, tension, pain, discomfort, or emotional stagnation, and then back away from it. So by easing your way into it is a little bit more gentle. And I know, Julie, you've had this experience in your years of practicing as a medical intuitive, and that allows the person, the beautiful spirit residing within their human home, that gives them the opportunity to embody more of their physical space. And it's that embodiment that you can then really turn back on that life force energy and to connect with that original essence. And back to your question, I believe that past life stuff, whether it be just generational, be lineage, whether it be karmic or universal, I believe all of that is stored within the body, stored within the DNA, stored within the tissue. And so you contractually agree to carry this forward. And if you align with it for the full expression of that, and I say align with it because many of us can carry genetically a recessive gene from previous generation, but we don't express that disease. So when we choose to align with it, then that's when it becomes a full expression of something being carried from the past into the present.
Beautifully said. To your point earlier about that people intuitively know what's going on, when we get to the point when I'm working with a client, when we get, and I don't do a lot of I call it energy field membrane healing on my show just because I don't have time. We're trying to get as many people on and figure out what's going on in the basic, something's identified, let's do a healing on it. But I do get into it when I have somebody for a whole hour for a private consult. But I'll get a year, Dr. Mary, and I'll see like a hole in the energy field membrane that reminds me of really thin, stretchy saran wrap, the kind you'd get on a tray of chicken breasts from the grocery store. That's what it reminds me of. And I'll see a tear or a hole, and I'll see myself going into it like Alice in Wonderland, going through the looking glass or walking into a scene of a movie. And I'll get a year, and I'll say, okay, the year was 1968. I would say low 90% of the time, the person will say, oh, that's when my parents got divorced. That's when we moved. That's when I was in a bad car accident and my mom was in the hospital for 3 months. Instantly, they know. And then if it's a past life thing, I'll get where it was, when it was, a little bit about what happened, and then we'll correlate it with what's going on in their current life. There's always a connection. Maybe not necessarily with all of the different variables, but it may be that in ancient Egypt, you were betrayed by the, mule broker or whatever. And then in this lifetime, they've been betrayed by somebody maybe at work or perhaps in their family or perhaps a spouse or a child. And it's still the same basic script, different set of variables. Do you run into that as well?
Well, I knew we were going to have a juicy conversation, Julie. I did. And I've been looking forward to this conversation. And listeners, I know you can tell that this is a topic that's very passionate to both Julie and I. And Julie, I love your strengths clairvoyantly. I love the information that you've received, exact years, being able to see people in period dresses and being able to see, the storyline of past lives. I feel it.
Right. Well, you're a kinesthetic learner. Yeah, I'm a visual learner. Yeah.
So there's a difference here, but we're saying, listeners, we're saying the same thing. So what ends up happening is that Julie talks about multiple lifetimes. I will create a grid, and for those that are watching the video, or those that are listening to the video, I'll try to explain. But I see like a grid with the y-axis and the x-axis and the z-axis. So there is an axis on the bottom that goes from left to right. There's going to be an axis that goes out z, and it goes away from the physical timeline. So I believe that we can heal retrocausally from the past and ground out any and all discordant lifetimes which no longer serves us, those reoccurring themes that keep showing up that we bump our head up against, and we can't figure out why we keep attracting these people or these situations into our lives. And then we move it forward out to the future to clear that pathway for not only ourselves, but our future generations as well. And I do this all via psychometry. And psychometry is just essentially being able to sense and feel via my hand. So when I drag somebody's timeline from left to right, it's almost like I can see peaks within that timeline going vertically off that timeline in clusters. And so I hold that energy over my hand, over that cluster until the energy has dissipated to ground out that cluster of lifetimes that may have corresponding themes, corresponding archetypes, corresponding illnesses, you name it. I don't necessarily dive into all the details because it's multiple lifetimes in multiple dimensions. And so but the intention is to sense, feel, ground down. Sense, feel, ground down. And then like I said, I take the energy and then I'm able to project forward again. So we know that the past clears previous generations, our past lives into current time. Moving forward, we can heal what happens in the future and future generations.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow, girl. All right. So I'm picturing, of course, visual learner, I'm picturing one of those clear grids with the left axis and the bottom one. And it's like what an engineer or an architect would use to make things to scale, I guess. I don't know. But I can picture what you're describing in my head, and I can picture a device probably that you can get at the Office Depot or Staples or someplace like that, like an office supplies store. I've seen those grids before. It's fascinating that that's what you're seeing it, Miss Kinesthetic. I mean, you're feeling it too.
I feel it. You see it.
You're seeing, yeah, but you're seeing it too because you know where the peaks are and the spikes are to hold your hand over it.
Yeah, I sense and feel. And I will say, Julie, that it does kind of traverse the multiple dimensionality of multiple lifetimes, right? Multiverses that we live in. So it gives me kind of this lens to know that we're so close, just an nth degree, so close. If we want to align ourselves to an nth degree off the grid that we're currently working on, we can align ourselves with a healthier body or a less conditioned responses, less emotional trauma. We have that ability to pivot our awareness to have a different expression. And because I see the multi-dimensions behind it, it allows me to really honor. And Julie, I know that this is going to be another can of worms for you, but it allows us to be able to look at the sacred geometry of it all. And so the human body, if I had $1 for every time I said this, the human body, meaning, the mind, body, spirit, the energetics never, ever ceases to amaze me. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, I have a dear friend named Son Cheng, he's been on the show, and he's a Taoist priest. And what you were saying about healing things in the future, when he does his healings, he heals to the future or the past where whatever the issue is no longer exists. And if the issue's been there for a long time through multiple lifetimes, he'll clear that. And then going forward, he'll clear it in the present. And then going forward, it's different. It's exactly what you said. It's the body doesn't have whatever the illness or disease is anymore. I want to pivot for a minute and talk about healing generational trauma and also healing future generations. I've heard of the past generations. I haven't heard so much about the future generations. I know that when we clear things from past generations, it affects future generations. But can you say more about that? That's really an interesting topic.
Yeah, I'm happy to. It's kind of a topic that's near and dear to my heart for my own personal journey and my own personal healing. And that I believe that it's, again, down to the DNA and the genetic makeup. So if we in present time have offspring, they're carrying the same genetic makeup of, 12 generations past, 1,200 people or different DNAs come together to make who this current person is in present time. So I believe, like, for example, I had to do some generational healing from my mother's side of the women on her side of the family, and had to go back and had to go back and had to go back. And so I knew that in present time that the healing that I was going through, I knew that it was also going to be transferred in for my sisters. I have had two sisters, and I knew that the healing was then going to transfer into my nieces. and moving forward for the children that my nieces have, because I don't have children. So I just know, sense, and feel that the healing, again, from a generational, multi-generational perspective down to the DNA, it does, just like you were explaining with the, I believe, Taoist healer, that you can heal previous generation, current, present time, and future generations simultaneously.
Is it usually done on the maternal line, or is it done in the feminine more than the masculine, or you just have more experience working with women than men?
Both, all of the above. I
Okay.
and I can say I don't know, but from my lens, and I'm just a lens of a single experience. From my lens, it weighs heavily on the female lineage going back, and maybe it's because we genetically are the carriers and carry the XY chromosome and can carry future generations. I'm not sure the really true cause or the reason of that, but that's how
Well,
it's.
that resonates with me. The X chromosome, is the female chromosome. So that makes total sense. I find it fascinating, too, along those lines, that when somebody's dying, as you know, in my 12 phases of transition, how we're surrounded by spirits of deceased loved ones and pets and also angels, it's always the female spirit. It's always the maternal spirit closest to the person who's dying that runs the show from the spirit world, brings in the angels, brings in the spirits. That really surprised me. And in many ancient cultures, it's always the maternal line. Like in Judaism, a kid is not considered to be a Jew unless the mother is a Jew. And that's why you'll see Gentile women who are marrying Jewish men and they want to raise the kid Jewish, they'll convert. I mean, it's not a matter of, okay, we're just going to go to the synagogue. It's a matter of you need to convert because you need to be Jewish in order for this child to be Jewish. So there's something there, I think, that's been handed down throughout the centuries with certain cultures, probably with most of them if we really did a deep dive on it. Fascinating stuff there. As a practicing chiropractor, how were you led to even learn about or study energy medicine?
Well, this is when I get to say that I knew at the age of 3. Okay. And so, listeners, please understand that I truly could not hear the environment that I was being raised in. So and I went undiagnosed with my hearing impairment, like Julie said, until the age of 3. So for the first 3 years, I lived in a very spiritual domain. So I spent a lot of time outdoors. I spent a lot of time sleeping in my sandbox. I rested a lot, and I just played in my own little spiritual world. And one thing that happened was I just naturally gravitated to want to have the desire to put my hands on people. So as often as I could, I would hold somebody's hand. Or if somebody wanted a little hand massage or a foot massage or their back rubbed, or if they, I would pet people. I wanted to have my hands on people. And as, time progressed, I remember I was raised in a Catholic environment. And of course, I never knew that there was a message that was being shared, during the Mass. It was still just another opportunity for me to play. And so I remember that I would stand between my parents, in the pews, and my right hand would be in my mom's hand, and my left hand would be in my dad's hand. And so the game, Julie, that I would play is that I would zap my mom's energy, run it through my physical body, zap my dad's energy. Take his energy, run it through my body, zap my mom.
As a
And
child,
that's what I did.
As a little kid. Wow.
And so that's the awareness. That's what was happening for me. That's how I played. And I remember, and I have photos, about the age of 3 or 4, I stopped growing. My physical body stopped growing. My head got really big. My hair got gray, thin, and long. And I now understand that I was in a pivotal point in my younger years. I was renegotiating contractually to stay on this physical planet with this conventional Catholic family. So I loved my mother, I loved my father, I loved my sister. Then I would have done, and I did do everything within my power to mainstream myself so that I wouldn't be too weird within this traditional family where both my parents really cared about the image that they projected out into our small little community. And so I renegotiated my contracts, got my stuff together, desensitized my awareness, right? Did my things academically. I remember having my hands on my father, and my older sister said something like, she's going to grow up and be a masseuse. And at that time, there was a negative connotation as to what masseuses really did. So my father piped up and he said, no, she's not. She's not going to be a masseuse when she grows up. But, as fate has it, I'm pretty darn close working as a chiropractor. So that's how that happened.
And that kinesthetic learner thing comes in too. So you were holding their hands, you were feeling the energy, and that's how you learned, was that information was coming in from a feeling standpoint.
Yes, through the clairsentience within the space of the second chakra, also through my hands, through the psychometry. And I do want to share with the listeners that another thing that was happening within my home environment is that my father was a functional alcoholic. And so I couldn't hear him come into the house, but I certainly could sense and feel the change in my sisters and my mother. And so consequently, when you're in a abusive type environment as a small person, I think we know how to maximize our resources to stay safe. And so that was a safety mechanism. I further enhanced my clairsentience and my feeling and my knowing because I wanted to keep myself safe and my mother and my sister safe. So it's not as though he was, well, I say functional, but I'm not sure that there's a place for that word in relation to alcoholism, but he wasn't abusive, physically abusive, but emotionally, yes. And it permeated through the entire household. So that was a survival skill that I learned, and it only was enhanced. Again, it all comes together, beautiful silver lining. Had I not had these life experiences, I don't think I would be who I am today.
Mm-hmm. That's how you developed your spidey senses at a very young age. Yeah. And then they came back online, it sounds like, when you were in Vietnam and in Bali with a force there at that point.
Yeah, they came back online sooner than that. They came back when I entered into chiropractic school, because then all of a sudden I had people surrounding me that were talking about healing from above, down, inside, and out. And so then they were like, yes, feel. What do you feel when you put your hands on patients? And then they were helping us to work with the dexterity of the hands and the sensitivity, with what we were feeling as well. So then all of a sudden, I started opening up to the beautiful, magical power of the innate intelligence and how we can heal ourselves. And the body has this wisdom that we can all tap into. It's just really wonderful. It was a great avenue for me.
Mm-hmm. My chiropractor, who I see at least once a month, she keeps everything lined up for me. She's visual. So when she's doing adjustments, she's got her eyes closed because she can see them. She can see it in her mind's eye. And it's interesting because I wasn't aware that chiropractic really had that much of the energy medicine all intertwined in there. And I think a lot of people aren't aware of that. They just think it's just another specialty for skeletal and orthopedic things, but there's really way more to it. And thank God it's being recognized by insurance and by, the medical community, because it was the stepchild for so many years with our allopathic medical model. And I knew a guy when I was in my 20s who was a chiropractor and then went and became a spine surgeon. And he combined both modalities in his practice and caught a lot of grief at that point in the mid 80s for, being a chiropractor, because the orthopedists were not fond of chiropractors at that point. And I think a lot of others weren't as well. But my gosh, the work that chiropractic does is so valuable and such a needed skill to help people heal.
I agree. And we've come a long ways. Now, I've been practicing for over 30 years. So when I first came into school, there was, thank goodness, there is a heavy scientific foundation to what it is that we study. Where in medical school, people are learning about pharmacology and drugs. And to replace that in chiropractic school, we're then learning about philosophy, about how the body can heal itself. And to make a long story short, there's a heavy scientific foundation, but there's an artistic component as to how you approach the physical body and what you do when you put your hands on. And there'll be some chiropractors who consider themselves to be mixed chiropractors, and those are people that typically lean toward more evidence-based modalities or instrument-based techniques, and they will bring in a lot of active rehabilitation, a lot of physical therapy, a lot of electrical modalities, things of that nature. And then you'll have those people, those chiropractors, that are more straight in their alignment. And so they're all hands-on. They're all about, remove any interference from the brain to the body, adjust the spine, and let the body miraculously heal itself. And those chiropractors typically are more aligned with the energy-based belief system, and that they understand the power of energy medicine.
Yeah. Couple more questions as we're winding down here. Let's circle back to your patient population, if you will, with the women. When a woman comes to you, give us a typical woman, if there is one, that comes to you, how you work with them, and then what the outcome can be.
Okay. So, Julie, I'm going to talk about the quote unquote typical female that shows up in my practice. And I think that you can appreciate that when myself, I've had my own personal healing journey, and it has its history, and I seem to attract those women who have similar struggles that I used to have. And those struggles align with the authentic voice, being able to really maximize the authentic expression coming from the fifth chakra, the inability to really trust, like we've been fear-based for a lot of years, and the inability to really deeply connect into our deepest desires, like we've lived life for other people for so long, and that we've carried other people's energies within the space of our second chakra. So typically these women are typically highly sensitive individuals, HSP individuals, and so they have a hard time delineating what is theirs versus what is somebody else's. And so, again, we go through the proper intake. The idea is to expand out my awareness, create an entrainment for the other person receiving the healing. And Julie, it is then when I ask for permission to lift the veil for a reading or a healing, that the person then signs in, and that signature, that voice, that activation calls their spirit forth. And then I get the blessing and the beautiful opportunity to be able to connect spirit to spirit. And then their spirit guides the journey. So I sit back, I lean away from my analytical brain, I go into the area of the hypothalamus, into the area of the pineal, and I put my hands up facing out towards wherever the patient is who's receiving the healing, and I get out of the way. And so then I sense and say, I feel and say, I sense and say and feel and say. And the words that come out of my mouth, Julie, make no sense to me. Sometimes there's some intellectual concept that's in there. But oftentimes the person is like, oh, wow, okay, no, I understand, I'm tracking, I gotcha. Because the information is for them, it's not for me. And so we go through the healing, working on multiple layers and levels simultaneously. And sometimes that requires, Julie, for me to modulate to a different frequency. If I'm accessing Akashic records, or if I am holding the Supreme Court for a renegotiation or a new contract, then I'm holding space. I am not in control. their spirit guides the process. The end result, ultimately, Julie, you know this process. You've got a beautiful smile and an open heart listening to me as I speak. You know this pathway, because what ends up happening is ultimately that this patient, this client, begins to align with their authentic essence, and they fluff up. They get bigger and more dense. And I can physically feel that. And then my job becomes to mirror back that beautiful essence that I'm witnessing so that they can then see it as and experience it as their own. So then there's a saturation point. I'm always looking at like a gauge, whether it be like a gauge that you see in old-fashioned cars or a vertical kind of a thermometer gauge. And we wait until there's like a level of, not wait, but we are mindful of the saturation level. So then the spirit says, I'm full, I'm done. And so then what we do is we package any other information that was not shared during that journey within their auric field. Then we make sure that the container is grounded and connected into their sacred geometry. And then we typically, because we just kind of come back in, we mutually separate. I don't expect people to come back into a contracted state. There's very little analytical information that gets shared at the end of the session because both of us we're connected to bliss.
Fabulous. Yeah. I love hearing healers' different techniques. We're all doing the same thing. We just have our own, techniques of how to do it. So fabulous. Well, thank you for sharing that. Last question. Why do we incarnate?
Oh, wow. I think that's a beautiful question. And I am saturated. I'm going to preface and say that I'm saturated in a very heavy Buddhist community here in Boulder, Colorado. And I believe that we come back multiple lifetimes because there are various different lessons, themes, people, contracts, things to complete, to have a full circle with. And that can be for the evolution, if you will, or the development of the spirit as it maintains a higher and higher frequency. But I ultimately, at the end of the day, I think it's for lessons, for learning opportunities.
Yeah, I agree. You are so extraordinary. I just think you're fabulous. And I have thoroughly enjoyed getting to hear how you do the work that you do. How can people learn more about you and your work?
Sure, I appreciate you asking, but before I answer that, I'm equally as impressed by you, my dear. So I just want to say blessings to you and for all those people that you've been of service to. There's no doubt that the alignment of how you are showing up in this world is in the creation of the divine essence. So much gratitude to you. Let's see, for connecting with me, please, listeners, I know that this is an intimate experience, so I'm going to invite you, if there's a sense of curiosity that you're like, I don't know about this lady. Well, I invite you to go to my website, which is www.drmarysanders.com. And when you're on that website, do me a favor, do two things. Number one, download the Ultimate Meditation Guide. It's 3 meditations that are designed to fit in your busy lifestyle, which is 10 minutes or less a day. And you can learn how to ground and connect with the frequency of Mother Earth. You can learn how to detach or mutually separate from other people, places, and things. And the last one is how to work with your timing clock in order to bring yourself into present time consciousness. So that's my gift to you. I want to invite you to take advantage of that. And then also on my website, you will see the opportunity to schedule what is called a discovery call. And it's just that. Discover whether or not you have a resonance with me. You have already listened to Julie and I talk about bantering friendly back and forth. Julie has so many strengths and sees things differently than I do. I have different skill set, and that's possibly being able to feel things, possibly within the physical body or within the clairsentience. Neither one of us is right. Neither one of us is wrong. We are unique, beautiful spirits. We happen to be holding space for the same purpose, and that's for transformational healing. So reach out, discover if it's the right match for you. If it's not, I'll refer you right back over to Julie.
What's your website?
www.drmarysanders.com. drmarysanders.com.
And we'll have that in the show notes too.
Thank you so much.
What a fun conversation. That's it for today, everybody. Sending you lots of love from Sweet Home, Alabama. Mwah! And from Colorado, too, where Dr. Mary is. We'll see you next time. To enhance your spiritual journey, click on one of the videos below and remember to subscribe, leave a comment, and share with your family and friends.